in his chair, read it leisurely through. Very neatly worded, upon my life. Quite a woman's letter, full of what people call tenderness and disinterestedness and heart and all that sort of thing. As he spoke, he twisted it up, and glancing lazily round at Hugh as though he would say, "You see this?" held it in the flame of the candle. When it was in a full blaze, he tossed it into the grate, and there it smouldered away. "It was directed to my son," he said, turning to Hugh, "and you did quite right to bring it here. I opened it on my own responsibility, and you see what I have done with it. Take this for your trouble." Hugh stepped forward to receive the piece of money he held out to him. As he put it in his hand, he added, "If you should happen to find anything else of this sort, or to pick up any kind of information you may think I would like to have, bring it here, will you, my good fellow?" This was said with a smile, which implied, or Hugh thought it did, "Fail to do so at your peril." He answered that he would. "And don't," said his patron, with an air of the very kindest patronage, "don't be at all downcast or uneasy respecting that little rashness we have been speaking of. Your neck is as safe in my hands, my good fellow, as though a baby's fingers clasped it, I assure you. Take another glass. You are quieter now." Hugh accepted it from his hand, and looking stealthily at his smiling face, drank the contents in silence. "Don't you don't you drink to the drink any more?" said Mr Chester, in his most winning manner. "To you, sir," was the sullen answer, with something approaching to a bow. "I drink to you." "Thank you. God bless you. By the by, what is your name, my good soul? You are called Hugh, I know, of course. Your other name?" "I have no other name." "A very strange fellow. Do you mean that you never knew one, or that you don't choose to tell it? Which?" "I'd tell it if I could," said Hugh quickly. "I can't. I've been always called Hugh. Nothing more. I never knew, nor saw, nor thought about a father, and I was a boy of 6, that's not very old, when they hung my mother up at Tyburn for a couple of thousand men to stare at. They might have let her live. She was poor enough." "Oh, how very sad!" exclaimed his patron with a condescending smile. "I have no doubt she was an exceedingly fine woman." "You see that dog of mine?" said Hugh abruptly. "Faithful, I dare say," rejoined his patron, looking at him through his glass, "and immensely clever. Virtuous and gifted animals, whether man or beast, always are so very hideous." "Such a dog as that, and one of the same breed, was the only living thing except me that howled that day," said Hugh. "Out of the 2,000 odd, there was a larger crowd for its being a woman. The dog and I alone had any pity. If he'd have been a man, he'd have been glad to be quit of her, for she had been forced to keep him lean and half starved. But being a dog, and not having a man's sense, he was sorry." "It was dull of the brute, certainly," said Mr Chester, "and very like a brute." Hugh made no rejoinder, but whistling to his dog, who sprung up at the sound and came jumping and sporting about him, bade his sympathizing friend good night. "Good night," he returned. "Remember, you're safe with me, quite safe, so long as you deserve it, my good fellow, as I hope you always will. You have a friend in me, on whose silence you may rely. Now, do be careful of yourself, pray do, and consider what jeopardy you might have stood in. Good night. Bless you." Hugh chuckled before the hidden meaning of these words, as much as such a being could, and crept out of the door so submissively and subserviently, with an air, in short, so different from that with which he had entered, that his patron, on being left alone, smiled more than ever. 'And yet,' he said, as he took a pinch of snuff, 'I do not like their having hanged his mother. The fellow has a fine eye, and I am sure she was handsome. But very probably she was coarse, red-nosed perhaps, and had clumsy feet. Aye, it was all for the best, no doubt.' With this comforting reflection, he put on his coat, took a farewell glance at the glass, and summoned his man, who promptly attended, followed by a chair and its two bearers. 'Pho!' said Mr Chester. 'The very atmosphere that centaurs breathed seems tainted with the cart and ladder. Here, Peak, bring some scent and sprinkle the floor, and take away the chair he sat upon and air it, and dash a little of that mixture upon me. I'm stifled.' The man obeyed, and the room and its master being both purified, nothing remained for Mr Chester but to demand his hat, to fold it jauntily under his arm, to take his seat in the chair, and be carried off, humming a fashionable tune. Chapter 23.